Hi guys, tonight we step barefoot onto frozen earth, the kind that bites instantly even through leather soles. You stand outside a medieval home just after sunset, breath fogging the air, the sky already deep blue and heavy with cold. Somewhere nearby, wood creaks as it contracts. A dog whines. Smoke curls lazily upward, promising warmth that may or may not last. This is not a romantic winter. This is survival weather. You probably will not survive this, at least not without learning a few hard lessons very quickly. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are settling in, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights and stay right where you are, because the night is coming on fast and medieval people knew that cold did not politely wait until morning. You feel it first in your hands. The ache sets in before numbness, a dull warning that heat is already leaking out of you. Medieval people did not think of cold as an inconvenience. They thought of it as an invading force, something that crept into the body and unbalanced it. One mainstream historical fact is that medieval medical theory inherited from ancient Greek humoral ideas believed cold and moisture could disrupt the body's internal balance and invite illness. So the night was not just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. You glance at the house again. It is small, low and squat against the wind, built this way on purpose. Winter survival begins long before bedtime. Wood has been gathered and rationed. Food has been cooked with an eye toward warmth. Doors have been checked for drafts that whistle like tiny knives. People in this world do not assume the night will take care of itself. There is a strange comfort in how routine this all feels to them. Cold is expected. It is planned for. You are the unprepared one here, shivering while they move with practiced efficiency. A quirky tidbit that often surprises people is that many medieval households timed their winter activities around daylight not just for visibility, but to minimize heat loss. Once darkness fell, movement slowed. Every opening of a door mattered. As you step inside, the temperature does rise slightly, but do not imagine modern warmth. The air is thick, smoky, and smells of damp wool ash and old wood. The fire is already burning, not roaring, because fuel is precious. Historians still argue whether medieval people felt colder than we do, or whether their expectations and constant exposure changed how they experienced temperature. What is clear is that they lived closer to the edge of tolerance. You hover near the hearth instinctively because heat draws you like gravity. The fire crackles softly, throwing light that dances on walls darkened by years of soot. This light is as important as the heat. Night without artificial lighting stretches long and deep. Darkness itself feels colder somehow, quieter, heavier. Outside, the wind picks up, pushing against the walls. You hear it through gaps you cannot see. Medieval buildings were not sealed tight. They breathed constantly, exchanging inside air for outside cold. That breathing kept smoke from suffocating everyone, but it also meant warmth never fully stayed. You begin to understand that survival is not about eliminating cold. It is about managing it. People start thinking about sleep earlier than you're used to. Not because they are tired, but because staying awake costs heat. Bodies at rest conserve energy. There is an unspoken understanding that night is something to endure rather than enjoy. You probably scroll your phone when it is cold. Here there is nothing to scroll. Only the slow passage of hours. As preparations wind down, you notice how close everyone stays to the fire. Tools are stacked nearby. Clothing is layered even indoors. No one lounges. Sitting too far from the hearth feels risky. Cold seeps in quietly through floors, through walls, through the soles of your feet. Straw on the ground helps, but only a little. Another historical fact slips into view here. Archaeological evidence shows that medieval floors were often layered with rushes straw, or reeds, sometimes mixed with herbs. This was partly for cleanliness, partly for insulation. It also added a faint grassy smell that mixed with smoke and human presence. Not exactly fresh, but familiar. You start to realize that the coldest part of the night has not even arrived yet. Early evening is deceptive. Temperatures drop further after midnight. Everyone knows this. That knowledge shapes behavior. Meals are eaten with care. Fires are banked, not fed to aggressively so they might last until morning. Someone adjusts a log with a stick, sparks briefly lighting the room like fireflies. There is also a psychological edge to the cold. Silence creeps in as conversation fades. Sound carries differently in winter. Snow, when it comes, muffles the world. Even without snow, the cold sharpens every noise. A door creak sounds louder. Footsteps outside feel closer. Cold makes you alert in a low, constant way. You think about the reality check again. You probably would not survive this, not because humans are weak, but because you are unused to being this aware of temperature, fuel, and time. Medieval people train themselves without realizing it. Cold shaped their instincts. As night deepens, you feel the house settle. Wood pops softly. The fire dims slightly. No one panics. This is expected. They will adjust again later if needed. Cold is never fully beaten, only negotiated with hour by hour. And as you stand there warming your hands, you begin to understand that surviving the coldest nights was not about one clever trick. It was about layers of habit, architecture, belief, and community. The night is long, and this is only the beginning. The house around you exhales slowly, almost like a living thing. You feel it in the faint movement of air along your ankles, in the way smoke drifts upward and then sideways, searching for an exit. Medieval houses were not sealed boxes. They were porous intentionally and accidentally, and that porosity defined how people survived the night. You take a few careful steps away from the hearth and the temperature drops immediately. It is not dramatic, just enough to remind you that warmth here has a very short reach. One mainstream historical fact is that most medieval homes in Northern Europe were built with timber frames and walls filled with wattle and daub, a mix of woven branches and mud. This construction was cheap, flexible, and quick to repair, but it offered limited insulation. Stone houses existed too, especially in towns, but stone held cold stubbornly, releasing it slowly long after the sun had set. You brush your hand along the wall. It feels cool and slightly damp. Moisture is the quiet enemy here. Cold air carries it in, and once inside it clings to everything. Medieval people noticed this even if they didn't explain it in modern scientific terms. They spoke of chill and damp as companions more dangerous together than alone. Historians still debate how much medieval builders understood about insulation versus simply working with materials they had always used. The roof above you is low-pitched, sharply to shed rain and snow. Smoke stains darken the beams. There is no chimney as you would recognize it, just a hole or hood that lets smoke escape imperfectly. This design choice shapes the night. A little smoke hanging in the air is unpleasant, but it also slows heat loss by reducing airflow. It is a compromise, and medieval life is full of these compromises. A quirky tidbit often overlooked is that some households deliberately blocked parts of their smoke outlets at night, using boards or cloth to keep more warmth inside. This made the air thicker, and eyes sting, but it was considered worth it on the coldest nights. You blink a few times, eyes watering slightly, and suddenly the logic feels very real. You notice the floor again. It is an even packed earth beneath layers of straw and debris. Cold seeps upward relentlessly. Even with footwear, you feel it in your bones. Raised wooden floors existed in wealthier homes, but even those let cold air circulate underneath. The idea of thermal breaks or insulation barriers simply does not exist yet. Instead, people rely on mass layering and habit. Windows are small if they exist at all. Glass is rare and expensive. More often, openings are covered with oiled cloth, parchment, or wooden shutters. At night, these are closed tightly. No one is looking outside now. The world beyond the walls has nothing to offer but wind and danger. You sense how inward-focused life becomes after dark in winter. As you sit, you realise the house is designed less for comfort and more for endurance. Everything funnels activity toward the centre, toward the fire. Furniture is sparse and movable. People bring stools closer as the night cools. No one claims personal space. Warmth is communal. There is also an acoustic quality to these homes. Sounds do not echo the way they do in modern rooms. The straw, the rough walls, the low ceiling all absorb noise. The house feels hushed, almost padded. This quiet amplifies your awareness of the cold. You hear the faint hiss of the fire, the wind outside, someone breathing nearby. Another historical fact emerges in the stillness. In many regions, medieval houses were shared with extended family or multiple households, especially in winter. This was partly economic, partly practical. More bodies meant more heat. Crowding was not always a sign of poverty. Sometimes it was a deliberate strategy against the cold. You imagine sleeping here with the house continuing to breathe all night long, cold air slipping in, warm air slipping out. There is no moment when the interior stabilizes. Temperature fluctuates gently like a tide. Medieval people adjusted to this rhythm, even came to expect it. You, on the other hand, tense every time a draft touches your skin. Scholars still argue whether people rearrange their homes seasonally more than we realize, shifting furniture and sleeping areas closer to heat sources in winter. What seems clear is that space was flexible. The idea of a fixed bedroom is rare. Where you sleep depends on weather, not architecture. As the fire settles, lower shadows lengthen along the walls. The house feels larger now, emptier, even though everyone is still here. Cold does that. It creates distance. People draw inward shoulders, hunching movements, slowing. You wrap your arms round yourself without thinking. You begin to understand that medieval survival was not about conquering the environment. It was about yielding intelligently. Houses breathed because they had to. They leaked heat because they could not afford not to. The cold was never shut out, only softened, dulled, negotiated with through wood, mud, smoke, and shared space. And as you settle back closer to the hearth, you feel a strange respect for these imperfect structures. They were not warm in the way you expect warmth. They were just warm enough if you knew how to live in them. You lower yourself onto a small wooden stool near the hearth, close enough to feel the fire on your shins, but far enough to avoid sparks. This is the heart of the house, the place everything orbits once the sun disappears. The hearth is not just a feature. It is a promise, though a limited one. The fire crackles softly, its sound steady and reassuring. You notice how carefully it is managed. No one throws on a large log with enthusiasm. Fuel is measured, almost counted in the mind. One mainstream historical fact is that firewood shortages were common in medieval Europe, especially near growing towns where forests were steadily depleted. Burning too much tonight could mean freezing later in the week. You lean in palms open, feeling the uneven heat. Your face warms quickly, almost uncomfortably, while your back remains cold. This unevenness is important. Medieval fires heat by radiation, not circulation. The warmth does not travel far. People learn to rotate like slow-moving planets, turning different parts of their bodies toward the flame. The hearth itself is simple. Stones blackened by soot form a shallow enclosure. Ash builds up in corners, insulating the coals beneath. That ash is not waste. It is carefully preserved. Hot embers can be buried and revived hours later. A quirky tidbit is that many households kept live coals overnight specifically, so they would not have to start a new fire in the morning, a process that could take precious time and energy in freezing temperatures. Smoke curls upward, sometimes drifting back down. You cough quietly and adjust your position. This is normal. The line between warmth and discomfort is thin. Historians still debate how tolerant medieval lungs were to constant smoke exposure, especially during winter when ventilation was reduced. What is clear is that people accepted it as part of staying alive. As night deepens, the fire becomes smaller, more controlled. Someone uses a poker to draw embers inward, creating a dense glowing core. Flames leap briefly, then settle. This is not a fire meant for spectacle. It is meant to last. You feel the room cool as the visible flames shrink, even though the embers still radiate heat. You realize the hearth also shapes behavior. Tasks are clustered around it. Spinning, mending, quiet conversation. No one wanders aimlessly. Movement is purposeful, efficient. Cold punishes unnecessary motion. Even standing up costs heat, especially if it takes you away from the fire. There is also a psychological comfort here. The fire provides light warmth and a sense of control in a world that feels increasingly hostile after dark. Outside, the night belongs to cold animals and unknown dangers. Inside the hearth marks a boundary. You're safe for now. Another historical fact slips in as you watch the embers pulse. In many medieval legal systems, the hearth symbolized the household itself. Taxes, obligations, and even population counts were sometimes organized around hearths rather than individuals. This reflects how central fire was to survival, especially in winter. You notice how people position themselves for sleep later. Blankets and bedding are placed nearby, ready to be warmed before use. This matters more than you might think. Cold bedding can draw heat out of the body rapidly. Warming it by the fire first is a small but meaningful defense. There is debate among scholars about whether medieval people slept with fires burning. In many ordinary homes, the answer is usually no. Open hearths were too dangerous to leave unattended. Fires were banked low or allowed to die down. The warmth you feel now is temporary. Everyone knows this. The night will grow colder as the fire fades. As the flames diminish, shadows grow heavier. The room feels quieter even though nothing has changed. Your body reacts instinctively, drawing closer to others. Warmth becomes social. Elbows brush, knees touch. No one apologizes. Privacy is a luxury summer affords, not winter. You think about how modern heating hums invisibly, maintaining a steady temperature without effort. Here, heat demands constant attention. The hearth does not care if you're tired. It responds only to fuel and skill. Survival depends on knowing exactly how much warmth you can afford. The fire gives one last soft crackle as a log settles. You stare into the embers, their glow slow and hypnotic. This is where medieval nights begin and end. Not with comfort, but with vigilance. The hearth promises warmth, but only if you respect its limits. And as you pull your hands back, fingertips tingling, you sense that the real challenge has not even arrived yet. The fire is fading and sleep is coming. That is when the cold truly tests you. You're finally guided towards sleep, not because the night feels safe, but because staying awake any longer wastes warmth. Beds wait in the darker edges of the room, close enough to the hearth to remember its heat, far enough to avoid stray sparks. You hesitate, already aware that sleep here is nothing like the soft collapse you're used to. The bed is not really a bed, not as you understand it. It is a wooden frame raised slightly off the ground, topped with a sack of straw that crackles faintly when you sit. That elevation matters. Cold pools low, clinging to floors like fog. Even a few inches can mean the difference between rest and misery. Household accounts from the period show that raised sleeping platforms were common wherever materials allowed, suggesting people clearly recognize this simple truth. You're not alone. Someone settles in beside you, then another. Bodies press close knees, touching shoulders, overlapping. There is no discussion. This is how warmth is made once the fire fades. Nighttime closeness is practical, not intimate. Privacy gives way to survival without complaint. Records from medieval households, especially in colder regions, show that shared sleeping was the norm rather than the exception. Entire families slept together, sometimes with servants or guests included. Separate bedrooms were rare outside the highest levels of society. This arrangement also helped guard against theft or danger, but warmth was the most immediate reward. As you shift, straw rustles beneath you, releasing a dry, earthy smell. It is not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. The mattress moulds slowly to your weight, creating shallow pockets that trap air and heat. One lesser-known detail is that straw was often replaced seasonally with winter bedding packed more densely to reduce airflow. It was a small adjustment with noticeable effects. You pull a blanket over yourself. It is heavy, woven from coarse wool that scratches your skin at first. Wool is the unsung hero here. Unlike linen or cotton, it retains warmth even when damp. This property made it indispensable in medieval winters, especially in regions where moisture was unavoidable. The weight of the blanket presses you down, minimizing exposed air. You notice how people arrange themselves deliberately. Feet tucked inward, backs turned toward drafts, children placed between adults. The group forms a rough knot of shared heat. Breathing slows collectively, as if the body rhythms are syncing without effort. There is some uncertainty among historians about how people negotiated boundaries in such close quarters, especially across age and gender. What is clear from surviving accounts is that the cold forced a level of physical proximity that modern sensibilities might find startling. Comfort in this context was measured in degrees of warmth, not personal space. Sleep does not arrive instantly. The cold lingers at the edges of your awareness. Your nose chills. Your fingers ache slightly before warming again. You adjust your position, searching for the warmest alignment. Eventually, stillness becomes its own insulation. The room is quiet now. The fire has settled into a dim glow, shadows barely move. Outside, the wind pushes against the walls, testing them. Inside, the shared bed holds firm. Heat accumulates slowly, almost imperceptibly, until the cold retreats just enough to let your muscles relax. You think about how unnatural this feels to you and how natural it feels to them. These arrangements are learned early. Children grow up understanding how to sleep for warmth. By adulthood, it is instinctive. Cold teaches quickly. As your breathing deepens, you realize something subtle. The night is no longer something you face alone. Survival, at least until morning, is collective. The bed becomes a small island of human heat in a sea of winter air. And as sleep finally takes hold, you sense that this closeness, this quiet negotiation of bodies and blankets, is one of the most powerful tools medieval people had against the cold. Not fire, not walls, but each other. You wake briefly in the night, not fully conscious, just aware enough to feel the weight of what you are wearing. Even in sleep, medieval people remain layered. Night does not mean undressing, it means adjusting. Clothing becomes a second kind of bedding, one that moves with you as you turn and curl inward. The fabric against your skin is rough but reassuring. Linen lies closest, absorbing moisture from your body. Over that comes wool, thick and slightly oily to the touch. This combination is deliberate. Surviving garments and written inventories show that households relied heavily on wool not only for daytime wear but specifically for night warmth. Wool fibres trap air efficiently, creating insulation that continues working even as the room grows colder. You shift and feel how the layers overlap. Sleeves are long, sometimes extending past the wrist. Tunics fall low over the thighs. There is no concept of minimal sleepwear. Exposed skin is wasted heat. People even sleep with belts loosened but not removed, keeping garments in place as they move. One detail that rarely makes it into popular imagination is how often medieval clothing was worn continuously for days or weeks in winter. Changing clothes meant exposing the body to cold air. That risk was avoided whenever possible. Cleanliness standards adjusted to the season, and warmth always took priority. Your head feels cool. Almost immediately, someone nearby pulls a wool cap lower over their ears. You follow instinctively, doing the same. Caps and hoods were essential at night. A significant amount of body heat escapes through the head, and medieval people noticed this long before modern science confirmed it. Nightcaps were common across social classes, from peasants to nobles. There remains disagreement among experts about how much people slept fully clothed versus partially undressed, especially in warmer regions. What does appear consistent is that in cold seasons, removing layers was rare. Sleep did not override common sense. As the hours pass, the weight of clothing becomes part of your body awareness. It limits movement, slightly encouraging stillness. Stillness conserves warmth. You curl tighter knees, drawn in arms folded close. This posture is not accidental, it is learned. The smell of wool fills your nose, earthy, faintly animal. It reminds you of fields and sheep and the long chain of labour that made this warmth possible. Shearing, spinning, weaving, all so you can sleep without freezing. Clothing here is not fashion, it is infrastructure. A lesser-known practice in some regions involved wearing garments turned inside out at night, bringing the rougher side outward to trap more air. Whether this was widespread or situational is still unclear, but it speaks to how attentively people experimented with warmth using what they had. You notice how the layers muffle sound. Fabric absorbs movement, softens the rustle of bodies nearby. The night feels padded, quieter. Even the cold seems dulled by the barrier between it and your skin. Your breathing slows again. Heat builds slowly inside the cocoon of cloth. The cold does not vanish, but it retreats to the margins. Toes tingle, then relax. Fingers lose their ache. You think briefly of modern pyjamas, thin and decorative, designed for climate-controlled rooms. Here clothing is part of the heating system. Every thread matters, every fold counts. As sleep deepens, you stop noticing the individual layers. They merge into a single sensation of heaviness and protection. The night continues its slow march outside the walls, but inside the shared bed, wrapped in wool and habit, you endure. An endurance you're learning as the quiet art medieval people mastered one layer at a time. Morning is still far away, but the cold sharpens again in the deepest part of the night. You sense it even in sleep, a subtle tightening of muscles, a shallow hitch in breathing. For those with fewer resources, this is the hour that tests the body hardest. You are pulled into their world, now the labourers and peasants who make up most of the medieval population. Their homes are smaller, their fires weaker, their margins thinner. Many live in single-room dwellings where everything happens in one shared space. Cooking, working, sleeping, all compressed into a few square meters. Warmth has nowhere to hide. Accounts from manorial records and tax surveys make it clear that poorer households often struggle to secure enough fuel for winter. Wood was expensive or restricted by law, especially where forests were controlled by lords. Dung-dried peat and even straw were burned when wood ran out. These fuels produced less heat and more smoke, and the nights that followed were long and bitter. You lie on a straw mattress thinner than before. It compresses almost completely under your weight, bringing you closer to the cold earth beneath. There is no raised frame here. Elevation is a luxury. Cold climbs easily into your bones, settling in knees and hips. You instinctively draw your legs closer to your chest. Children are nearby, their bodies smaller, losing heat faster. They're tucked between adults whenever possible. Elderly relatives, too, are positioned carefully shielded from drafts. Survival depends on constant awareness of who is most vulnerable. In these households, warmth is allocated as deliberately as food. One small but striking detail appears in wintertime court records. Complaints sometimes mention neighbours stealing bedding cloaks or even door planks during extreme cold. These were not crimes of greed so much as acts of desperation. Fabric and wood were heat sources just as vital as fire. There is no illusion here that winter is picturesque. It is endured day by day, night by night. People sleep in shifts sometimes, especially when someone must tend a weak fire or watch over animals brought inside for warmth. Exhaustion is common. So is resilience. Researchers continue to disagree on how often people in extreme poverty died directly from cold exposure versus from illnesses worsened by cold. What is certain is that winter mortality rates rose sharply in harsh years. The cold rarely killed dramatically. It weakened quietly, opening the door to fever, cough and hunger. You hear coughing in the dark. It echoes softly in the low space. Breath fogs faintly even indoors. Condensation forms on walls, then freezes in the coldest weather. The house feels like a shell barely holding back the season. Yet there is also stubborn ingenuity. People stuff rags into wall gaps. They hang extra cloth over doorways. They sleep closer to animals, sharing space with goats or pigs, whose body heat makes a noticeable difference. This blending of human and animal life is not accidental, it is strategy. A lesser-known winter practice involved heating stones in the fire and wrapping them in cloth to place near feet or under blankets. These makeshift warmers cooled quickly, but could provide precious relief during the coldest hours before dawn. You feel the strain in your own body now. Muscles ache from staying curled, joints protest the chill, sleep comes and goes in shallow waves. There is no deep rest, only pauses, and yet dawn usually comes. The knowledge of that matters. People measure the night not in hours but in survival. Each breath taken is a small victory. Each morning reached is proof that the system, however harsh, still works. As the first pale light eventually creeps toward the horizon, you understand something essential. For the poor surviving winter nights is not about comfort at all. It's about persistence, about holding on through cold that never fully leaves, trusting that shared bodies, layered cloth and practiced endurance will carry you through until the fire can be fed again. You might expect wealth to mean warmth, but as you move through a castle at night, that assumption fades quickly. Stone surrounds you on every side, thick and imposing, yet it holds the cold like a memory it refuses to forget. Even after a fire burns for hours, the walls remain cool to the touch, quietly draining heat from the air and from you. Castles were built to defend, not to comfort. Their high ceilings allow warm air to rise far above where people sleep. Corridors stretch long and empty, channeling drafts like unseen rivers. Contemporary descriptions of noble residences often complain about winter chill despite the abundance of fuel and servants. Money could buy firewood, but it could not rewrite physics. You walk across a stone floor that feels almost wet with cold. Tapestries hang along the walls, their colours muted in the low light. They are not just decoration. These heavy textiles reduce drafts and add a thin barrier between human bodies and stone. Estate inventories list vast numbers of hangings and wall cloth, suggesting their role in winter survival was well understood. The bedchamber itself is smaller than the public rooms, intentionally so. Beds are massive structures raised high and enclosed on three sides. Thick curtains surround them, creating a smaller pocket of air. These bed hangings are drawn tightly at night, transforming the bed into a kind of fabric room within a room. One curious detail preserved in household manuals is the recommendation to warm the bed with hot coals placed briefly inside a covered pan. The pan is removed before sleep, leaving behind warmth without open flame. It is an elegant solution, but one that requires careful timing and trusted servants. Despite these efforts, noble households still struggle. Personal letters from the medieval period mention frozen ink, numb fingers, and breath visible indoors. Comfort remains relative. Wealth reduces risk, but it does not banish cold. There is still discussion among historians about whether castles were colder than peasant homes in winter. Smaller structures with lower ceilings could sometimes feel warmer despite inferior materials. The castle's grandeur works against it once the fire dims. You settle into the great bed layers of wool and fur piled around you. Furs appear more often in elite households, especially ermine, fox and sheepskin. These trap heat efficiently, but they are heavy, encouraging stillness. Movement is minimal. Even turning over feels like effort. Outside the bed curtains, the room continues to cool. Inside, your breath slowly warms the enclosed space. The difference is noticeable. You begin to understand why noble beds were often shared as well, despite the availability of separate chambers. Heat remains the great equalizer. The silence here feels deeper than in the peasant home. Stone absorbs sound differently. Footsteps echo faintly in distant halls. The night feels vast. Cold amplifies that sense of scale, making you feel small inside these walls, built to impress and intimidate. A servant passes quietly, checking fires in adjoining rooms. Their labour continues through the night, feeding hearths, banking coals, ensuring that morning does not arrive to a frozen household. Warmth here depends not just on resources but on constant human effort. You realise that even in luxury, medieval people sleep with awareness. Castles do not cradle you, they test you. Stone and cold form an alliance that must be countered every night with cloth bodies and discipline. As you drift closer to sleep, you feel the faint chill seeping back in, pressing against the outer layers of bedding. Wealth has softened the struggle, but it has not erased it. The cold still waits patiently just beyond the curtains, confident it will have its turn again before dawn. The bell does not ring at a convenient hour. It cuts through the darkness long before dawn, a dull metallic sound that vibrates through stone and bone alike. You stir in your narrow bed breath, already fogging the air, and remember where you are. This is a religious house, and comfort is not the point. Monasteries and convents are built with intention, but not with warmth as the priority. Rulebooks make that clear. Many religious orders believed that enduring cold strengthened discipline and humility. Warmth was allowed, but only in measured doses. Records from Benedictine communities describe limited fires, often restricted to communal spaces and carefully rationed throughout winter. You slide out from under your blanket and the cold greets you instantly. The floor feels unforgiving beneath your feet. Stone slabs pull heat from your skin without hesitation. There is no lingering by the bed. Lingering is indulgence. You move quickly, wrapping your habit tighter around your body. The clothing itself is simple, heavy wool that hangs straight and loose. It is not tailored for warmth, but it does help. Layers are added in winter when permitted. Cloaks appear, hoods are pulled low, sleeves overlap. The body becomes a bundle of fabric and intent. One detail tucked into monastic correspondence reveals that some communities allowed a small warming room during the harshest weeks of winter. This space, often near the kitchen, offered brief relief. Access was regulated sometimes by age or health. The very existence of such rooms suggests that cold pushed even strict rules to their limits. The chapel is colder still. High ceilings rise above you, drawing warmth upward. Your breath forms small clouds as you kneel. The stone bench chills you through layers of wool. Yet voices rise in unison, steady and calm. Singing warms the body slightly, breath deepening, circulation increasing. It is not accidental. Physical needs are folded quietly into spiritual practice. There remains disagreement among scholars about how severe winter conditions truly were inside religious houses compared to secular dwellings. Some evidence suggests monasteries were better supplied with fuel. Other sources emphasize restraint and deliberate hardship. The truth likely varied widely, shaped by region, wealth, and the interpretation of rule. After prayers you move through corridors where lamps burn low. Light is precious here too. Shadows pool in corners. The cold sharpens your awareness. Every step is careful. Slipping on stone in the dark can be as dangerous as freezing. You notice how people cluster even here. Brothers walk closer than necessary. Sisters sit shoulder to shoulder during reading. The instinct to share warmth overrides formal distance once the temperature drops. Discipline adapts quietly to reality. Beds in these houses are narrow and sparse. Straw mattresses, wool blankets, sometimes a single fur for the elderly or infirm. Personal belongings are few. Extra clothing is treasured. At night, many sleep fully dressed hoods, pulled up hands tucked inside sleeves. A lesser-known winter allowance appears in some rule modifications. Additional blankets are permitted during extreme cold, framed not as comfort, but as protection of health so prayer can continue. The language is careful. Warmth is justified only as a means to devotion. You lie back down after the early hour has passed, muscles stiff, breath slow. Sleep returns in fragments. The cold never fully releases its grip. It remains a constant presence, a reminder of bodily limits. And yet there is a strange calm here. Routine provides structure when the environment is harsh. Knowing what comes next reduces anxiety. Bells mark time. Rules guide action. In a world without central heating, predictability itself becomes a kind of shelter. As the night inches toward morning, you realize that for monks and nuns surviving the cold is woven into a larger purpose. Endurance is not just physical. It is spiritual. The cold is not merely an enemy. It is a test met one prayer, one breath, one frozen step at a time. You hear it before you see it. A soft shuffle, a low grunt, the unmistakable sound of an animal settling nearby. In the medieval night walls do not always separate humans from livestock. Warmth blurs boundaries that daylight insists upon. As the fire fades and the cold deepens, animals are brought closer. Sometimes they enter the house itself. Sometimes they sleep in an attached byre, sharing a wall with the living space. The difference matters. A shared wall absorbs and radiates heat, slowly turning body warmth into a steady, if faint, source of comfort through the night. Rural building layouts from across medieval Europe show this pattern repeatedly. Long houses, especially in northern regions, house people and animals under one roof, divided by little more than wooden partitions. The design is practical. Animals generate heat continuously. Their presence raises indoor temperatures just enough to matter. You lie, still listening. The sound of breathing nearby is heavier, slower. A cow shifts its weight. A goat sneezes softly. The air smells different now, richer, layered with hay dung and warm fur. It is not pleasant by modern standards, but it is familiar here. Smell is part of the sensory trade-off for survival. One overlooked detail appears in winter farming accounts. Animals were often fed later in the evening during cold spells. Digesting food produces heat. Keeping livestock active and well fed overnight increased the warmth they gave off, benefiting everyone sharing the space. You pull your blanket tighter, oddly comforted by the presence. Animals are predictable. They move slowly at night. They do not bring sudden danger. In a world where wolves still roam, and theft is a concern, having animals close also means guarding valuable property. There is no universal agreement among researchers about how widespread indoor animal housing truly was. Some regions favoured separate structures even in winter. Climate building tradition and available materials all played a role. What remains clear is that when temperatures dropped far enough, ideals gave way to necessity. The floor beneath you feels slightly warmer here. Manure and straw form thick layers in animal areas, creating insulation almost by accident. Heat rises gently. It is not enough to banish the cold, but it takes the edge off. You notice the difference in your feet first. Children grow up with this arrangement. They learn early not to startle animals in the dark, not to wander too close, not to complain about smells. Warmth teaches its own rules. Comfort becomes a matter of priorities, not preferences. In some households, small animals share even closer quarters. Cats curl near sleeping bodies. Dogs press against legs. Their warmth is immediate and personal. Their presence also deters pests and intruders. Every living creature contributes something to the nighttime economy of heat. You hear soft chewing, rhythmic and calm. It becomes almost hypnotic. The animals are content. They do not fear the cold the way you do. Their thick coats and steady metabolisms handle it better. Humans borrow that advantage simply by staying near. There are stories passed down in rural folklore of travellers surviving brutal winters by sleeping in barns among animals when no house was available. Whether embellished or not, these tales reflect an understanding shared across centuries. Life radiates heat. Stone and wood do not. As the night wears on, the sounds fade into the background of your awareness. The cold still exists, but it feels held at bay by this quiet partnership. Humans and animals endure together, each unaware of how essential the other has become. You drift closer to sleep again, breathing in the layered scents of winter shelter. It is not clean. It is not comfortable in the modern sense, but it works. And in a medieval winter, working is enough. You feel it first in your stomach. A slow, steady warmth that spreads outward, quieter than fire, more reliable. Medieval people understood something deeply practical about food. What you eat before sleep matters just as much as what you wear or where you lie. The evening meal is heavier than the midday one, especially in winter. Thick stews simmered for hours, dense breads baked dark, and solid fats saved carefully for the coldest months. Written household guides and monastic menus show a clear pattern. Winter suppers were designed to last, not in taste but in heat. You remember the meal from earlier. It sat heavily in your belly, not unpleasantly, just present. That presence is deliberate. Digesting food generates warmth. Slow digestion does it longer. Medieval cooks might not have used modern terms, but they noticed the effect. A full stomach slept warmer. You curl slightly, feeling the gentle internal heat working through you. Outside the blankets, the air remains cold. Inside, something holds. This is warmth, made from effort earlier in the day. Fuel gathered, food prepared, time invested. In colder regions, animal fat played an especially important role. Butter, lard and dripping appear frequently in winter records, even among modest households. Fat burns slowly in the body, offering sustained energy through long nights. Lean food fills you. Fat keeps you alive. There are hints in period writings that people adjusted portion sizes depending on the weather. Storm coming. Frost expected. Eat more tonight. These decisions are not indulgent. They are protective. Hunger and cold reinforce each other brutally. You swallow once throat dry and feel gratitude for that simple fullness. It dulls the edge of the cold just enough to let your muscles relax. Sleep comes easier when the body is not pleading for fuel. One unexpected practice shows up in some regions. Spiced drinks taken before bed, warmed wine or ale infused with herbs and spices believed to encourage heat and circulation. Cinnamon, ginger, cloves. Expensive ingredients used sparingly but chosen with care. The warmth they provide is brief, but the comfort is real. Not everyone agrees on how common such drinks were outside towns or wealthy households. What seems certain is that people experimented constantly with diet as a form of protection. Food was medicine. Food was insulation. The smell of the meal still lingers faintly in the room. Cooked grain, fat, smoke. It blends with wool and straw, creating a sense of shelter that is more than physical. Familiar smells signal safety. Your body responds. As the night deepens, digestion slows, heat spreads, then steadies. You feel less aware of your fingers, your toes. They are warm enough now to be forgotten. That here counts as success. You think of modern advice about not eating too late, about light dinners and empty stomachs. None of that applies here. In this world, going to bed hungry in winter is dangerous. People know it. They plan around it. Sleep thickens. Thoughts blur. The quiet warmth from within joins the fading warmth from the fire and the shared warmth of bodies nearby. None of them is enough alone. Together they carry you through another stretch of the night. And as you drift, you understand that medieval survival was built layer upon layer. Not just cloth and stone, but habit and timing, and the simple wisdom of knowing when to eat. You wake again briefly with a strange awareness of your own body. Not discomfort exactly, but attention. Medieval people listened to their bodies in ways that feel unfamiliar now, especially in winter. Warmth was not assumed, it was monitored. There is an old idea at work here, one passed down through generations rather than textbooks. The body is thought of as something that can tip out of balance. Too much cold seeps in and stiffness follows. Too much dampness and illness creeps close. People learn to notice small changes. A chill in the chest, a tightness in the joints. These sensations guide behaviour long before dawn. You are just slightly careful not to disturb the fragile pocket of warmth you share. Movement costs heat. Everyone knows this, even if no one explains it aloud. You settle again, breathing slow and shallow, conserving what little warmth you have built. Medical writings from the medieval world describe heat as a vital force, something generated by digestion, and breath protected by proper clothing and posture. Sleep itself is seen as a vulnerable state. The body relaxes, pores open, cold slips in more easily. This belief shapes countless small habits, from how people lie to how they cover their heads. You feel your shoulders tense, then soften as you consciously relax them. Tension wastes energy, rest preserves it. These lessons are learned early. Children are corrected gently. Do not sprawl. Do not kick off blankets. Keep yourself gathered. There is an odd calm in this attentiveness. You're not fighting the cold. You're negotiating with it. You notice how your breathing deepens when you pull your chin slightly down, reducing exposed skin. It works. The air you exhale warms the space near your face. Some medieval texts recommend sleeping on one side rather than flat on the back during cold months. The reasoning is vague, tied to ideas about internal flow and protection of vital organs. Whether it truly mattered is uncertain, but people followed the advice because it made sense to them. You tuck your hands closer to your chest. Fingers warm faster there. Feet are harder. They always are. You brush them against someone nearby, borrowing a little warmth without waking them. No one minds. This is understood. A small sound breaks the quiet. Someone shifts. Straw rustles. Fabric slides. Then stillness returns. The house breathes around you. Cold presses gently at the edges, testing, retreating, returning. There are hints in personal letters that people paid close attention to dreams during winter nights, believing them influenced by bodily states. Cold dreams were thought to signal imbalance. Warm dreams, comfort. Sleep becomes another form of observation. You drift again, half aware, half gone. The cold remains present but no longer sharp. Your body has found a temporary equilibrium. It will not last forever. Morning will bring movement, exposure, fresh cold. But for now this balance holds. And as sleep deepens, you realize that surviving medieval winter nights was as much about awareness as equipment. People learned to read themselves, to make small corrections in the dark, guided by sensation rather than certainty. The night continues slow and patient while you rest inside the fragile warmth you've learned to keep. You shift slightly and feel the bed respond beneath you, not soft, not springy, but alive in its own way. Straw compresses then resist, creating shallow hollows that seem to remember your shape. Medieval bedding is not about comfort in the modern sense. It is about separation. Between you and the ground. Between you and the cold that settles there. Beds that lift the body even a little matter more than you might expect. Cold sinks. It pools low, hugging floors and creeping upward through ankles and calves. Raising the sleeper interrupts that flow. Surviving household records show that when families could afford only one piece of furniture, the bed often came first. Tables could wait, chairs could be improvised, elevation at night was protection. You feel the wooden frame beneath the straw, rough and solid. It creaks faintly when someone else shifts. That sound is familiar, reassuring. It means the structure is holding. Many beds are built high, sometimes surprisingly, so requiring a small step or stool. This is not about status. It is about warmth. Under the bed space is left open. Air moves there, but slowly. Sometimes storage fills the gap, chests, baskets, spare tools. These objects reduce airflow, trapping warmth above. Nothing is accidental here, even if no one ever writes it down. You notice how the straw smells faintly sweet mixed with dust and dryness. It insulates by trapping air, but only when it stays fluffed. Over time it compacts and loses effectiveness. That is why straw mattresses are refilled regularly more often in winter. It is work, but necessary. There are references in estate accounts to winter bedding being thicker and heavier than summer versions. Extra straw, additional layers, sometimes even leaves or chaff mixed in. People adjusted their beds with the seasons, much like they adjusted clothing and diet. You lie still, letting your body warm the space immediately around you. The bed responds slowly, holding onto that heat. It does not generate warmth. It preserves it. That difference matters. Some people believed that sleeping too low invited illness, especially in damp climates. Whether this belief came from observation or theory is unclear, but it shaped habits. Children were discouraged from sleeping directly on the floor once they were old enough to climb. You feel grateful for the small barrier beneath you. Without it, the cold would feel sharper, more insistent. With it, the night feels manageable. Not kind, just manageable. As the hours pass, you wake less often. The bed does its quiet work. You no longer feel the floor calling your heat downward. Instead, warmth circulates within the small pocket of bodies, blankets, and straw. And in this stillness, you understand that something as simple as height can mean survival. Medieval nights taught people to think vertically as well as horizontally. Up meant warmer, down meant danger. You breathe out slowly, letting sleep deepen again, supported by wood, straw, and generations of quiet, practical knowledge. You wake just enough to feel fabric brushing your face. Something heavy hangs close, shifting slightly as the air moves. Bed curtains surround you, now drawn tight, turning the bed into a small enclosed world. The space feels different immediately. Warmer, quieter, as if the night has been pushed back a few careful inches. These curtains are thick often, wool or heavy linen sometimes layered. They trap the air your body warms and keep it close. In larger houses, especially among those with means, bed hangings are considered essential winter equipment. Inventories list them alongside blankets and cloaks, not as decoration but as protection. You pull the curtain closer without opening your eyes. The sound of the room fades further. Drafts that once brushed your cheek no longer reach you. The difference is subtle but undeniable. Inside this fabric enclosure, your breath softens the cold. Moisture gathers faintly in the air, holding warmth rather than stealing it. People learned quickly that open beds lost heat too fast. A canopy frame made it possible to hang cloth on all sides, shrinking the space that needed warming. Even in modest homes, improvised versions appear. Extra blankets pinned up, cloaks draped over ropes. Anything that could reduce air movement was pressed into service. You notice how still the air feels now. Smoke from earlier lingers faintly, but it no longer swirls. The curtains slow everything down. Heat, smell, sound. Time itself seems thicker inside this small chamber. There are descriptions from the period that complain of bed curtains feeling stuffy or stale. Yet those same accounts mention using them anyway once winter truly set in. Comfort was measured against cold, and the balance always tipped toward warmth. You adjust your position, careful not to disturb the fragile equilibrium. When you move, the warm air shifts slightly, then settles again. This is the benefit of enclosure. Heat stays where it is made. Children learn early not to kick curtains aside in the night. Doing so invites cold into the bed space. Adults correct them, gently pulling fabric back into place. These habits become instinctive. You feel it in yourself now, the urge to keep everything closed, sealed, held together. Some beds include a valance beneath the frame as well, blocking drafts from below. This detail appears frequently in household descriptions, especially in stone buildings, where cold rises relentlessly from floors. Blocking airflow above and below creates a surprisingly effective pocket of warmth. There is debate about how common full bed enclosures were outside wealthier homes. What is clear is that the idea of reducing space to conserve heat appears everywhere. Whether with curtains, bodies, or furniture, people worked constantly to make winter nights smaller. The fabric smells faintly of smoke and wool. It's comforting in a way that surprises you, familiar, protective. You feel less exposed, less aware of the vast cold pressing against the walls beyond. As sleep deepens again, your breathing slows. Each breath adds a trace of warmth to the enclosed air. It accumulates. Not much, just enough. Enough to let your shoulders drop, your jaw unclench. You think briefly about modern bedrooms, wide and open, designed for air circulation and aesthetics. Here openness is the enemy, containment is survival. The curtains sway slightly as someone nearby shifts, then stillness returns. The bed becomes a quiet capsule moving through the coldest hours of the night, and as you sink back into sleep you realize that these simple lengths of cloth easily overlooked are doing life-saving work. They hold the night at bay one breath at a time until morning finds you still warm enough to rise. You become aware of how you're lying. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet check as if some part of your mind is still on watch. Your body has learned that position matters. How you arrange yourself in the dark can decide whether warmth stays or slips away. You draw your knees up, slightly curling inward. This shape feels natural now, compact, efficient. Medieval people rarely slept sprawled out in winter. Stretching exposed too much skin, too much surface for cold to steal heat. The curled posture reduced that risk, turning the body into a smaller, denser source of warmth. You tuck your chin down instinctively, protecting your throat. This is one of those habits that never needed explanation. Cold air on the neck feels dangerous. Scarves, collars, hoods all exist for this reason, and even in bed the instinct remains. Your breath warms the space close to your chest and face, creating a tiny loop of recycled heat. Hands are hidden next. Sleeves swallow them. Fingers curl inward. Exposed hands lose warmth quickly and take longer to recover. People learn this through experience, not theory. Children who slept with hands uncovered woke with aching joints. They were corrected gently again and again until the lesson stuck. Nighttime rituals develop around these truths. A final adjustment of blankets. A quiet prayer. A moment spent making sure no edge is loose. No gap inviting cold. These rituals are not superstition. They are practical checklists passed down without written instruction. There are mentions in medieval writings of recommended sleeping postures, often tied to ideas about balance and internal flow. Whether these positions truly improved warmth or simply encouraged stillness is difficult to say. What matters is that people believed posture influenced how the night treated the body. You notice how rarely anyone turns over now. Movement breaks the warm pocket you have built. It takes time to rebuild it, so you stay still even if a shoulder stiffens or a leg tingles. Discomfort is tolerated, cold is not. Breathing becomes part of the ritual too. Slow, shallow, efficient. Deep breaths draw in cold air and cool the chest. Gentle breathing keeps warmth close. You adjust without thinking, guided by sensation. Some households practice small bedtime routines meant to seal the body against cold. Rubbing feet briefly, pressing hands together, even warming the breath against the palms before tucking them away. These gestures appear in scattered references and oral traditions, quiet habits rarely recorded in formal texts. You settle deeper into stillness. The bed creaks once, then quiets. Fabric shifts softly. Outside the curtains, the house continues to breathe, but inside your small space, the air barely moves. As sleep thickens again, you realize how much of medieval winter survival depended on learning when not to move. Stillness becomes a skill, a discipline, one practiced every night until the body remembers it even in dreams. The cold does not vanish, it waits patiently, but for now, held at bay by posture, ritual and restraint, it has been delayed. You drift balanced carefully between awareness and rest, shaped by centuries of shared knowledge about how to lie, how to breathe, how to last until morning. You feel the edge of a hood brush your cheek as you shift, a soft reminder that you are still dressed for the night. Night clothing in the medieval world is not a separate category. It is an extension of day wear, adjusted, supplemented and repurposed once darkness falls. A wool cap stays on your head, pulled low over your ears. Even now, half asleep, you sense how much warmth it preserves. People notice long ago that uncovered heads cooled quickly. Caps appear everywhere in winter descriptions worn indoors, outdoors, awake asleep. Removing one feels almost reckless. Your night garments are loose but layered. A long shirt of linen closest to the skin, then heavier wool over it. The linen absorbs moisture, keeping dampness away from the body. The wool traps heat. This pairing shows up repeatedly in surviving clothing lists and household accounts. It is simple, effective, and widely understood. You adjust a sleeve that has ridden up, tucking your wrist back into warmth. Wrists and ankles are vulnerable. Cold creeps in there first. Some people wrap strips of cloth around these joints before bed, especially the elderly or those already stiff with pain. One practice that surprises modern readers appears in a few winter notes and illustrations. People sometimes slept wearing their outdoor cloaks. Bulky and awkward, yes, but cloaks were designed to block wind and hold warmth. At night, they became extra blankets that moved with the body. Not everyone agrees on how common this was. Cloaks were valuable and heavy, and sleeping in them was not always comfortable. Still, in bitter cold, comfort took second place. Warmth won. You feel the fabric press against you as you curl tighter. Clothing reduces drafts inside the bed space, sealing small gaps where blankets shift. It also adds weight, encouraging stillness. This stillness matters more than softness. Feet are wrapped carefully. Woolen hose or socks stay on. Bare feet invite misery. Some households add foot coverings made specifically for sleep, thicker and less fitted than daytime hose. These rarely survive in the historical record, worn out and replaced again and again. The smell of worn wool surrounds you. Smoke, body, time. It is not unpleasant, just familiar. Familiarity itself brings calm. Your body relaxes more easily when nothing feels strange. Children are dressed especially carefully at night. Extra layers, caps tied securely. Their smaller bodies lose heat faster. Parents check them one last time before settling themselves, adjusting blankets and clothing with practiced hands. There is no final undressing ritual here, no symbolic transition into sleepwear. Night comes and clothing adapts to it. Sleep happens within layers of preparation rather than apart from them. As the hours stretch on, you stop noticing individual garments. They merge into a single sense of enclosure. The cold still presses from outside, but it meets resistance at every seam, every fold of cloth. And as sleep deepens again, you understand that these forgotten night garments were not an afterthought. They were part of the system. Quiet, heavy and essential, they worked alongside beds, food and fire to carry medieval people through the longest nights. You notice the difference immediately when a smaller body shifts beside you. The warmth changes, shape becomes uneven, fragile. Children and the elderly experience the night differently. Their bodies give up heat faster, hold it less reliably. Everyone in the room knows this, even if no one says it out loud. A child's breathing is quicker, shallower. Their limbs feel cool more often. Adults adjust around them without thinking, drawing them closer, tucking blankets more tightly, pressing a forearm gently along a small back. These movements happen half asleep, guided by habit rather than instruction. Winter trains caretakers well. Older bodies struggle too, joints stiffen in the cold, pain wakes people who would otherwise sleep through the night. Hands ache, knees throb. You feel it in the way an elderly person shifts more carefully, guarding certain movements. Cold does not just chill, it sharpens every old injury. Household rules bend quietly for these needs. Extra layers appear for those who need them most. A child gets the warmest spot. A grandparent is placed away from drafts. No one questions this. Survival depends on protecting the vulnerable first. You sense a careful distribution of warmth happening around you. Stronger bodies form a loose barrier. Smaller ones stay enclosed. It is not sentimental. It is practical. Losing a child or elder in winter is devastating not only emotionally but socially. Every person matters when labour is scarce, and knowledge is hard won. There are hints in winter records that families adjusted sleeping arrangements as health changed. Someone sick or frail might be moved closer to the hearth for the season. Beds shift. Spaces are reassigned. Flexibility is key. Children sleep more restlessly. They kick. They uncover themselves. Cold finds them faster. You feel an adult arm reach out, pulling a blanket back into place, tucking it firmly around a small body. This happens again and again through the night. Care does not stop with sleep. Older people wake more often. Cold drives sleep away. You hear quiet sighs, slow movements, whispered prayers. Some hold warm stones wrapped in cloth near aching joints. Others rely on extra layers or the steady presence of another body close by. There is no clear agreement among modern researchers about how much winter cold shortened lifespans directly versus how much it worsened existing conditions. What is clear from burial records and seasonal patterns is that winter took its toll unevenly. The very young and the very old paid the highest price. You feel a quiet tension in the room because of this. Night is never completely relaxed. Someone is always listening, always half awake. Cold demands vigilance, especially when it threatens those who cannot protect themselves fully. In some households, mothers slept lightly all winter, waking at the smallest sound from a child. Grandparents were checked often. A cold hand held briefly to judge warmth. A blanket adjusted. A hood pulled lower. These actions are small, but they add up. There are traces in folk stories of winter nights spent telling quiet tales or singing softly to help children relax and conserve energy. Calm children sleep warmer. Fear wastes heat. Comfort is not indulgence here. It is strategy. You sense how much emotional labour winter requires. Warmth is not just physical. Reassurance steadies breathing. Familiar voices reduce restless movement. A calm room holds heat better than a frightened one. As the night drags on, the smallest bodies finally settle. Breathing deepens, stillness returns. The adults relax slightly, though never fully. Winter teaches people to sleep with one part of the mind awake. You lie there absorbing this quiet network of care and realize that surviving medieval nights depended as much on attentiveness as on material resources. Fire food and fabric matter. So does noticing who needs more, who needs watching, who needs to be held closer until morning arrives. The cold remains patient and persistent, but so does care, and for many nights that is enough. You sense the difference before anyone explains it. The air itself feels changed. In towns, winter nights carry a different weight than they do in the countryside. The cold is the same, but the way it moves, the way it lingers, feels altered by walls, streets and bodies packed closer together. In a town, houses lean toward each other, sharing walls, sharing heat without meaning to. Narrow lanes trap air. Smoke from countless hearths hangs low, forming a faint blanket over roofs and alleys. It smells sharp and sooty, but it slows heat loss just enough to matter. People notice that nights in town feel slightly less brutal, though never easy. You lie in a cramped upper room above a workshop. Below you someone stirs embers one last time before sleep. Heat rises through the floorboards, weak but welcome. Even a whisper of warmth counts. Urban buildings stack life vertically, and that stacking becomes an advantage in winter. Rural nights are quieter, colder too. Homes stand apart, fully exposed to wind that sweeps unchecked across fields. There is no shared wall to borrow warmth from. Smoke drifts away, quickly taking heat with it. You feel the difference immediately when the wind presses against every side of a house instead of just one. In villages, people compensate by building thicker walls or bringing animals closer. In towns, they rely more on density. Both approaches reflect careful adaptation to place rather than wealth or ignorance. People worked with what surrounded them. Town dwellers often sleep above ground level. Upper floors are warmer than cellars or ground rooms where cold settles. You notice how bedrooms climb upward whenever possible. Storage sinks lower. Heat is always invited to rise. Street noise filters faintly through shutters, a distant cough, a cart creaking somewhere late. Even these sounds signal safety. Activity means people are still awake, still tending fires, still alive in the cold. In the countryside, silence dominates. Snow absorbs sound. Wind whistles through gaps. You become acutely aware of every creak of timber. Loneliness feels colder, heavier. Shared suffering matters more when neighbours are far away. Some winter records suggest that people in towns relied less on shared beds simply because walls already shared warmth. Others argue that crowding remained common regardless of location. What seems certain is that space itself behaved differently depending on where you slept. You feel grateful now for the subtle heat that lingers in this town room. It is not much, but it reduces the urgency. Your body relaxes a fraction sooner. Muscles unclench more easily. Yet towns bring risks of their own. Fire spreads faster, smoke thickens, air stagnates. The same density that helps against cold can turn dangerous quickly. People sleep lightly, listening for shouts, bells, the sudden crackle that signals disaster. In rural homes, fire is farther away from neighbours. Risk spreads slower, but so does warmth. Trade-offs shape every night. As sleep deepens again, you realise that medieval people did not experience winter as a single condition. Cold changed character from street to field, from wall to open wind. Survival strategies shifted accordingly, learned through years of paying attention. You drift held between the closeness of town and the openness of countryside, aware that where you sleep matters almost as much as how you sleep. The cold respects no boundaries, but people learn to bend space itself into a tool against it. The night you're in now feels harsher than most. You sense it in the way the cold does not settle, but sharpens in the way the air seems to tighten around every surface. This is not an ordinary winter evening. This is one of the extremes people would remember for years afterward. Weather in the medieval world is unpredictable in a way that feels personal. There are no forecasts, no warnings beyond a look at the sky and a memory of how winters behaved before. When severe cold arrives early or lingers too long, it catches entire communities off guard. You feel that anxiety humming quietly beneath the stillness. Ice creeps along window edges, even inside. Water left in bowls skins over, then freezes solid. You hear the faint crack of timber contracting as temperatures drop further. These sounds are unsettling reminders that the cold is still advancing, not retreating. In years of extreme winter, people change their routines dramatically. Travel slows to almost nothing. Night watch duties are shortened or shared more frequently. Fires are kept alive longer despite the cost. Risk calculations shift. Tomorrow's fuel matters less than surviving tonight. You remember stories told in low voices about winters when rivers froze hard enough to cross, when bread turned stiff before it could be eaten, when livestock died standing. These are not legends. They are warnings passed down so no one forgets what is possible. There are references in chronicles to entire regions struggling during unusually cold years. Crops fail. Fuel shortages worsen. Illness spreads faster in weakened bodies. The cold itself is rarely blamed alone. It is the chain reaction that follows it that frightens people most. You pull the blankets tighter. Everyone does. Even small movements feel costly now. The air inside your bed space cools faster than before. You breathe carefully, trying to maintain warmth without drawing in too much cold air. In such conditions, people sometimes break their own rules. Fires are left burning longer than usual. Bedtimes stretch closer to the hearth. Animals are brought in that would normally stay outside. Survival overrides custom. There are disagreements among modern climate historians about how frequent these extreme winters truly were, and how much they shaped medieval society. What cannot be denied is the depth of memory they left behind. A single terrible winter could influence building choices, farming habits, even local laws for generations. You feel fear stirring, not panic, but awareness. Extreme cold strips away the margin for error. A missed log, a loose shutter, a forgotten blanket edge. Any of these could matter now. The silence feels heavier. Snow muffles the world outside, turning the night inward. Sound carries less, but what remains feels closer. A cough, a creak, a whispered prayer. In some communities, people stayed awake in shifts during the worst cold spells simply to check on fires and on each other. Sleep became lighter, more cautious. Dreams shortened. Vigilance took priority. You sense how these nights test not just bodies, but trust. Neighbours rely on each other. Families rely on shared effort. Isolation becomes dangerous. As the hours inch forward, the cold finally stabilizes. It does not retreat, but it stops intensifying. This small mercy is enough to let breathing slow again. Muscles unclench slightly. The night becomes survivable once more. You drift back towards sleep with the knowledge that medieval people lived with this uncertainty always in the background. Most nights were manageable, some were not. And it was the memory of nights like this that shaped how people prepared, planned and respected winter, long after the ice melted. You're almost asleep when the smell changes. Sharp, acrid. Smoke shifts direction, suddenly no longer rising lazily but spreading low and fast. Your eyes open at once. In medieval nights, warmth and danger share the same source and everyone knows it. Fire is watched even as it fades. Even when it seems harmless, even when embers glow quietly, it can turn without warning. You hear someone stir, then another. No one panics, but no one ignores it either. Fire gives life through heat, and it can take everything just as quickly. Homes are built close. Beds cluster near hearths. That closeness makes warmth possible, but it also magnifies risk. One stray spark can catch dry straw. One overturned brazier can change a night forever. Winter increases the danger because fires burn longer, hotter and more often. You sense the tension in the room as someone rises, carefully steps slow and deliberate to avoid kicking embers loose. A poker scrapes softly. Ashes pulled over glowing coals, smothering flame while keeping heat alive beneath. The smell eases. Smoke thins. Breathing slows again. This careful balance is learned early. Children are warned never to play near the hearth at night. Adults sleep lightly enough to wake at the faintest change in smell or sound. Fire safety is not a set of rules. It is a shared vigilance that never truly rests. There are stories passed quietly through communities about winter fires that spread before anyone could react. Town records list entire streets lost overnight. Rural tales speak of families waking too late, trapped by smoke. These stories linger in memory long after the ruins are cleared. You feel the fear settle back into its usual place, not gone but managed. Fire is banked lower now. The room cools slightly in response. No one complains. A cooler night is better than no morning. In some households, someone remains half awake through the coldest hours assigned to tend the hearth and listen. It is not always the same person. Responsibility rotates. Fatigue is dangerous too. Balance matters. You think about how modern heating hides its risks behind walls and controls. Here warmth is visible, audible, alive. You hear it breathe. You smell it shift. You feel it respond to care or neglect. The fire settles into a steady glow. Embers pulse gently beneath their blanket of ash. Heat returns slowly, safely. The room exhales as one. You lie back down, heart rate easing. Sleep does not come immediately. Awareness lingers. Fire demands respect. It always has. As the night continues, you understand that medieval people accepted this constant negotiation. Warmth was never free. It came with watchfulness, with discipline, with the knowledge that comfort could turn into catastrophe in seconds. Eventually exhaustion wins. You drift again, trusting that someone will wake if the fire speaks out of turn. In this shared trust, the night holds together. You imagine what this night would feel like without walls at all. The thought alone makes you pull your blanket closer. Not everyone in the medieval world ends the day with a roof overhead. Travellers, messengers, pilgrims, and the quietly displaced learn a different relationship with cold. If you're on the road, nightfall brings urgency. Distance matters less than shelter. An extra mile walked before dark can mean survival. Roads empty quickly in winter, not out of fear, but calculation. Cold punishes hesitation. You find yourself in a roadside inn, low and crowded thick with the smell of smoke, sweat, damp cloaks and spilled ale. Warmth here is shared indiscriminately. Bodies press close on benches and floors. Privacy disappears completely. No one expects it. Everyone expects heat. The hearth is large, but overwhelmed by the number of people drawn to it. Cloaks hang everywhere, steaming gently as frost melts away. Boots line the edges of the room. The floor is slick with mud and straw. It is chaotic, loud at first, then slowly quieter as exhaustion takes over. Those who cannot afford an inn rely on barns, porches, church vestibules, or the kindness of strangers. Hospitality is not just virtue here. It is mutual insurance. Turn someone away tonight, and tomorrow it may be you shivering outside. You curl up with your cloak pulled over your head, using it as both blanket and tent. The fabric smells of travel, road dust, old rain, smoke from other fires. It blocks drafts better than you expect. Cloaks are designed for movement, but they serve well in stillness too. Some travellers sleep sitting up, backs against walls, knees drawn tight. This posture keeps vital organs warmer and reduces exposure. It is uncomfortable, but it works. Sleep comes in fragments, short and cautious. Animals offer shelter too. Horses and mules are not just transport. They're heat sources and windbreaks. You position yourself downwind, using their bodies to shield against biting air. Their breath steams softly in the dark. There are accounts of travellers carrying small flints and tinder, even when fires are forbidden or dangerous. A single spark carefully managed can mean the difference between frostbitten fingers and usable hands come morning. Fire, even briefly, is worth the risk when you have nothing else. Not everyone survives these nights. Stories circulate of travellers found frozen beside the road, cloaks pulled tight, faces calm. These stories are not told to frighten children. They're told to remind adults not to linger, not to gamble with winter. You feel a deep appreciation now for walls, however thin, for shared roofs, for the quiet trust of sleeping among familiar faces. Travel in winter strips life down to essentials: heat, shelter, time. As you drift into uneasy rest, you understand that medieval warmth was often borrowed, not owned. Borrowed from strangers, from animals, from public spaces, from fleeting fires. Survival depended on knowing where warmth might be found and reaching it before the cold decided otherwise. The night passes slowly, measured in breaths and heartbeats, until the faint promise of morning light finally softens the dark. Only then does the road become possible again. You wake to a quiet clink, a small sound of stone against metal. Someone is preparing something in the dark, carefully, like a ritual. You smell herbs before you see them, sharp and green, even through smoke and stale air. In medieval winter, warmth is not only sought with fire and cloth, it is coaxed through remedies, objects and beliefs that sit somewhere between practical and hopeful. A cloth bundle is unfolded near the hearth. Inside are smooth stones warmed earlier and kept close. They are wrapped again and passed into bedding tucked near feet or against the belly. The warmth is gentle, brief, but it reaches places fire cannot. You feel your toes relax as the stone radiates heat through wool. People also use heated bricks when they have them, or ceramic jugs filled with hot water. These are handled with care because burns are a real risk and winter already strains the body. Even so, the method persists because it works, at least for a while. You catch the scent of rosemary and sage, perhaps dried and crumbled into a small pouch. Such pouches are placed near the chest or under pillows. Sometimes this is for smell alone, a way to make bedding feel cleaner and more comforting during months when washing is difficult. Sometimes it is believed to protect the body from cold-related sickness. Comfort and protection blend easily when the nights are long. You hear someone mention warming the blood. The phrase is said calmly as if it explains everything. People speak of heat moving through the body like a substance that can be strengthened or weakened. Foods, drinks, and herbs are chosen to encourage that inner warmth, especially for those who already feel fragile. A small cup is offered warm ale infused with spices if the household can spare them, or simply a hot herbal broth. The drink slides down and spreads a soft heat through your chest. The effect is not dramatic, but it is immediate enough to matter. There is disagreement today about how effective many of these remedies truly were, and whether their benefits were physiological or psychological. But in this room on this night, the distinction feels less important. Relief is relief. You notice charms too. A small object tied to a cord, a cross tucked into bedding, a strip of cloth marked with a prayer. These are held close, not waved around theatrically, just kept near like another layer. When the environment feels uncontrollable, small tokens restore a sense of agency. Someone rubs their hands with oil near the fire, then slips them back into sleeves. The oil reduces cracking and keeps skin from splitting in cold air. It is basic care, the kind that keeps small injuries from becoming serious problems in a season when infection is always nearby. Even the act of breathing is treated as something to manage. People cover their mouths with cloth when stepping outside at night, warming the air before it enters. Indoors, they turn their faces slightly toward the bed curtains, trapping warmth from their own breath. You start to see how much winter survival depends on tiny interventions. Not heroic acts, but a constant scatter of small choices. Heat a stone, wrap it well, drink something warm, adjust a hood. Press a charm into your palm and let your fear settle. As the night continues, these practices fold into the rhythm of sleep. A foot nudges the warm stone closer. A hand rests on a herb pouch, comforted by its scent. A whispered prayer fades into silence. The cold remains outside the bed curtains, persistent and patient. Inside, warmth is built from whatever can be gathered, not only wood and wool, but belief routine and small clever objects that hold heat for a few precious hours. You drift back into sleep with the stone still warm against your feet, feeling the quiet comfort of knowing that someone somewhere thought ahead for this moment. You begin to notice how the night feels different depending on who you are. Not just where you sleep or what you wear, but how your role shapes the cold itself. Winter does not treat everyone the same, and neither do the customs built to survive it. As the hours stretch on these differences become quietly visible. You sense it in how women settle themselves more carefully, arranging layers with practiced efficiency. Many of them have spent the day near hearths, cooking, brewing, mending. They know heat intimately, how quickly it fades, how easily it is wasted. At night, that knowledge shows in small adjustments. An extra fold of cloth at the shoulder, a blanket tucked under the chin of a child before tending to their own rest. Men, especially those who worked outdoors, carry the cold differently. Their muscles ache with a deeper stiffness. Hands that gripped tools all day throb now that they are still. You feel it in the way someone flexes fingers slowly before tucking them away, or sighs as joints protest the sudden lack of movement. Sleeping arrangements reflect these differences without ceremony. Women often position themselves where they can reach children easily. Men tend to take outer positions in shared beds, forming a barrier against drafts. This is not spoken aloud. It is simply how bodies fall into place after generations of repetition. Clothing at night mirrors daily roles too. Women keep aprons or extra shawls close, ready to rise quickly if needed. Men sometimes sleep with belts nearby, tools within reach, prepared for emergencies that do not pause for cold. Winter nights are unpredictable. Readiness matters. You notice how pregnancy changes everything. Expectant mothers are given the warmest places, extra layers, more food. The household shifts around them subtly. The stakes feel higher. Cold becomes more threatening when another life depends on the same fragile heat. There are traces in old household instructions suggesting that women were advised to guard warmth carefully, to avoid chills that might affect fertility or health. Whether these ideas were accurate matters less than the fact that they shaped behavior. carefulness becomes expectation. Children observe all of this without being told. They learn where to sit, where to sleep, who needs covering first. By adulthood, these patterns feel natural. Winter teaches roles as effectively as any lesson. You also sense moments of quiet resistance. Someone pulls a blanket closer than expected. Someone claims a warmer spot without asking. Cold sharpens awareness of fairness. Too much imbalance breeds resentment even in loving households. People negotiate warmth constantly, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes with a whispered word. In some homes, women sleep closer to the hearth because they will rise before dawn to rekindle the fire. Proximity saves time and heat. In others, men take that place if early work demands it. These choices are practical, not ideological. Winter reshuffles priorities. You lie there aware of how your own body fits into this arrangement. Where you're placed says something about what is expected of you come morning. Cold makes these expectations clearer, more urgent. As the night deepens, distinctions blur again. Everyone curls inward. Everyone grows quiet. The cold is an equalizer at the deepest hour when even roles soften in the face of shared endurance. Breathing slows across the room. The smallest movements ripple warmth from one body to another. No one speaks. There is no need. The system holds. You drift aware that medieval winter nights were not just physical challenges but social ones. Who sleeps where? Who gets the warmest layer? Who wakes first? These choices shape survival as surely as fire and walls, and as sleep takes you again, you feel how deeply these patterns are embedded, learned not from rules but from long nights like this one repeated until the cold itself teaches you your place within the warmth. You wake without fully waking, stirred by the sense that time has shifted. The night feels different now, thinner somehow. Medieval sleep does not move in a single smooth arc. It breaks, pauses, resumes. This rhythm feels natural here, even if it would trouble you elsewhere. You lie still, aware that others are awake too, not rising, just present. Someone adjusts a blanket. Another clears their throat softly. This quiet interval in the middle of the night is expected. Winter nights are long, and sleep stretches to fill them in pieces rather than all at once. People plan for this. Candles are kept close but not lit unless necessary. Movement is minimal. The goal is not activity but awareness. Bodies cool when sleep deepens too much. Waking briefly allows people to check their warmth, their coverings, the fire if it still glows. You feel your own temperature and make a small adjustment, tucking fabric more tightly around your shoulders. It helps. The cold retreats just enough. Then you stay still, letting warmth rebuild. In some homes, this middle waking is used for quiet tasks. A woman mends by touch alone. A man checks a latch or listens for animals. In religious households, prayers are whispered. These acts are not interruptions. They are part of the night structure. There are hints in diaries and sermons that people saw this wakeful period as calm and reflective rather than restless. The world is silent. Thoughts slow. Worries feel manageable in the dark. You notice how the cold behaves differently now. Earlier it pressed hard. Now it feels steady, almost predictable. The house is settled. Fires have either died or stabilized. Bodies have found their balance. This is the cold you can live with. Sleep returns gently after this pause. Not all at once, but in layers. You drift, then surface, then drift again. Each return to sleep feels deeper, warmer, as if your body has learnt exactly how still it must be. Outside, the night continues its slow turn. Stars shift. Frost thickens. But inside, the rhythm holds. Wake, adjust, rest. You realize that this pattern suits winter. Long, unbroken sleep would leave too much time for heat to escape unnoticed. These small awakenings act like maintenance checks, keeping the fragile system intact. As you slip back into rest, you feel oddly calm. The night is no longer something to endure blindly. It is navigated in stages, each one carrying you closer to morning. You notice the quiet before you notice the cold. Snow has fallen while you slept, soft and patient, changing the world without asking permission. The sounds you half expected are gone. No distant carts, no loose shutters rattling. Even the wind seems to have lost its voice. The silence feels thick, almost physical, pressing gently against the walls. Winter nights sound different under snow. Everything is muffled, slowed, wrapped. The house feels more isolated now, as if it has been lifted slightly away from the rest of the world. You breathe and hear only yourself and the slow breathing of others nearby. This silence brings relief and unease at the same time. On one hand, snow can block drafts, sealing cracks in roofs and walls. People notice that snowy nights often feel a little warmer indoors, despite lower temperatures outside. On the other hand, silence makes every unexpected sound feel louder, sharper, more alarming. You hear a faint creak and tense before realizing it's only timber adjusting to the cold. Wood shrinks in winter. Houses complain softly as temperatures drop. These sounds are familiar. They do not mean danger, but they still keep part of your mind alert. The smell in the room has changed too. Snow-dampened smoke presses it downward. The air feels heavier, cooler, but also cleaner somehow. You draw a slow breath and hold it briefly, savouring the stillness. People move less on nights like this. Snow discourages wandering. No one expects visitors. Doors stay closed. Shutters are checked twice. The household turns inward, completely conserving warmth and attention. You remember stories whispered about winter nights when sound vanished entirely, when snowfall was so heavy it swallowed voices and footsteps alike. In those stories, danger felt closer, not farther away. Silence meant help would not arrive quickly if something went wrong. Inside, the quiet sharpens your awareness of small things. A blanket edge slipping, a child stirring, the faint glow of embers breathing under ash. You sense how sound and warmth are connected. Noise often means movement. Movement creates heat. Silence signals stillness. You adjust slightly, then stop yourself, deciding the movement is not worth the heat it would cost. Stillness returns. The silence deepens again. In some regions, people believe snow carried a kind of protective quality at night. It hid tracks, softened the approach of predators, and brightened the darkness just enough to see by moonlight. Others feared it, knowing that heavy snowfall could trap families indoors for days, cutting off supplies and help. You imagine the world outside now. Fields erased, paths hidden, landmarks softened into unfamiliar shapes. Travel will be difficult come morning. That knowledge settles into the room like an extra blanket. Tomorrow's concerns press gently against tonight's need for rest. The silence encourages reflection. Thoughts drift more easily without interruption. Memories surface. Plans form and dissolve. The mind wanders, then settles again, guided by the steady rhythm of breathing nearby. A sudden sound breaks the quiet. Snow sliding from the roof. It thumps softly against the ground. Your heart jumps, then eases. Others stir briefly, then relax. Winter trains quick reactions and quicker forgiveness for false alarms. You notice how light behaves differently too. Moonlight reflected off snow filters faintly through shutters, creating a pale glow that shifts as clouds pass. The darkness feels less absolute, more textured. This altered night changes how cold feels. It is still present, still demanding, but it seems calmer, somehow less aggressive. Snow wraps the world in layers just as blankets wrap you. The same principle at work on a larger scale. You think about how medieval people learned to read these signals. Wind means drafts. Snow means silence. Ice means danger. The environment speaks constantly, and winter nights amplify its voice, even when that voice sounds like nothing at all. As sleep pulls you back under, you accept the quiet rather than resisting it. The house holds steady. The snow keeps falling. The night stretches long and soundless, carrying you gently toward morning. You can tell where you are by how the cold behaves. In the north, it arrives early and stays late, settling into bones with quiet confidence. In the south, It slips in unexpectedly, catching people off guard who are used to milder nights. Geography reshapes winter, and medieval people feel that difference every time they lie down. You imagine yourself farther north now. The night is longer, darker, heavier. Snow stays on the ground for months. Homes are built lower, tighter, pressed into the earth, as if seeking shelter from the sky itself. Roofs sag under the weight of ice. Doors open inward so snow cannot block them shut. Every detail reflects long familiarity with cold that does not forgive mistakes. Here people rely even more on fur. Sheepskin lines cloaks. Pelts cover beds. The smell is strong, oily, unmistakable. It clings to everything. You feel how effectively it traps heat, how little air moves once wrapped inside it. Movement becomes slow, deliberate. Stillness is rewarded. Now the scene shifts southward. The cold feels different here. Sharper perhaps, because buildings are not designed to hold it back. Stone houses stay cool even in summer, a blessing then a curse now. People who expect mild winters struggle more when frost arrives unexpectedly. Fires are smaller, bedding lighter, habits less practiced. You lie in a southern house where shutters rattle more than they should. The cold creeps in through stone that has never learned how to resist it. People pile on extra clothing, awkwardly adapting on the fly. Complaints rise more easily here, not because the cold is worse, but because it feels wrong, out of place. Travellers notice these contrasts immediately. A northerner visiting the south in winter might shake their head at thin blankets and open rooms. A southerner heading north might marvel at the layers of preparation, the seriousness with which cold is treated. Trade carries ideas as well as goods. Thick textiles move south. Building techniques creep north. Over generations, borders blur. Still, local climate leaves its mark on how people sleep, how they build, how they endure. You feel how your own body reacts differently depending on expectation. In the north, cold feels inevitable, almost comforting in its predictability. In the south, it feels intrusive, unsettling, harder to ignore. The same temperature, different experience. Night routines adjust accordingly. Northern households check fires more often. Southern ones improvise when frost surprises them. Neither approach is careless. Both are shaped by history. You drift between these places in your mind, aware that medieval winter nights were not a single shared experience. They varied by latitude, by weather patterns, by what people had learned to fear and what they had learned to accept. As sleep deepens again, you carry this understanding with you. Cold is universal, but its meaning changes with the land beneath your feet. And medieval people, wherever they lived, learned to listen closely to the kind of winter their home delivered. You catch yourself thinking about what you were taught to imagine. Drafty castles, freezing peasants, a past permanently wrapped in misery. Lying here now, half warm, half aware, you realise how incomplete those pictures are. The cold was real, yes, but so was adaptation. Medieval people were not passive victims of winter. They were experienced negotiators with it. The idea that everyone constantly shivered through every night does not quite hold up when you pay attention to the details. People invested enormous effort into making nights survivable. They planned months ahead. They adjusted daily. They noticed what worked and quietly abandoned what did not. You think of the bed curtains enclosing you, the shared warmth of bodies, the careful management of fire food chosen with intention, clothing layered with purpose. None of this looks accidental. It looks practiced, repeated, refined. There is also the belief that medieval people were indifferent to comfort, that hardship was simply accepted without complaint. But complaints do exist. Letters mention cold fingers. Records mention frozen ink. Rules bend during harsh winters. These are signs of people who cared deeply about warmth, not people who ignored it. You shift slightly and feel how carefully the space has been arranged to keep you from feeling the worst of the night. Someone thought about this before you lay down. Someone remembered a previous winter. Someone adjusted. Another common misunderstanding is that only the wealthy could manage winter well. Yet you have already felt how small homes sometimes held heat better than grand ones, how shared space mattered more than luxury, how knowledge passed within families could compensate for lack of resources. You also think about the notion that people slept poorly all winter. In truth, sleep changed shape, but it did not disappear. It bent around the cold rather than breaking under it. Fragmented rest was not failure. It was adaptation. The night feels calmer now, not because it is warmer, but because you understand it better. Fear fades when patterns emerge. Medieval people learned those patterns early. Children grew up watching adults manage the cold. By adulthood, much of it felt automatic. You imagine explaining modern heating to someone here. Invisible warmth at the touch of a switch. Perfectly even temperatures. No smoke. No fire risk. It would sound like magic. But you suspect they would ask questions too. What happens when it fails? Who controls it? What does it cost? Comfort has trade-offs in every era. Here warmth demands attention and cooperation. In exchange, it builds resilience and awareness. People know when they are warm and why. They know when they are not and what to do about it. As you settle back into stillness, you feel the quiet confidence beneath the night's routines. This is not a world that forgot how to stay alive. It is a world that learned carefully through long winters how to endure. And as sleep draws you closer again, you let go of the myths you carried in. The medieval night is not gentle, but it is not careless either. It is shaped by human effort layered patiently against the cold night after night. You feel the night shift again, not dramatically, just enough to remind you that even the best preparation has limits. There are moments when the cold presses harder than expected, when habits fall short and warmth slips away despite every effort. Medieval people knew this too. They didn't always win. You sense it in the way the room grows quieter, more tense. Someone coughs and does not settle back immediately. Another pulls a blanket tighter, then tighter still, as if the fabric might suddenly become thicker through sheer will. These are the moments when the system strains. There are winters when fuel runs low earlier than planned. Wood piles shrink faster than expected. Peat dries poorly. Dung burns too quickly. The fire that should have lasted until dawn fades before midnight, leaving only a dull chill in the hearthstones. When that happens, choice is narrow. You lie still listening, feeling the temperature drop. Breath feels cooler in your lungs. Fingers ache before they go numb. The room does not panic, but awareness sharpens. Someone whispers a calculation. How long until morning? How much heat remains in bodies? And bedding. Illness complicates everything. Fever steals strength and disrupts warmth. A sick body cannot regulate itself as well. Blankets pile up. Heated stones are rotated more often. Someone stays awake longer than planned, watching, listening to breathing that sounds wrong in the dark. There are nights when roofs leak, melted frost dampening bedding and making the cold feel sharper. Wet cloth loses its protection quickly. People scramble quietly to shift positions to trade damp layers for drier ones if any remain. These adjustments happen without complaint. Complaints waste breath. You remember the stories again, the ones told in low voices, nights when infants did not wake, when elders slipped away quietly before dawn. These stories are not exaggerated. They are reminders of the margin everyone lives within. The cold rarely arrives as a sudden enemy. It works slowly. It wears down resistance. It waits for exhaustion, hunger, illness, or simple bad luck. Medieval people understood this well. They respected the cold because they had seen what happened when respect failed. You feel fear then honest and sharp. Not panic, but the recognition that survival is never guaranteed. The night holds power, and it does not negotiate with hope alone. In these moments, community matters more than ever. Neighbours check on each other after storms. Families crowd together more tightly. Fires are shared when possible. Someone with extra fuel may quietly offer it, knowing they might need the same kindness later. There are traces in village records of communal responses to extreme cold, shared shelters, rotating watch duties, collective decisions about when to conserve and when to spend precious resources. These responses do not erase loss, but they reduce it. You feel how exhausting this vigilance must be winter after winter. Not just the cold itself, but the constant calculation. How much to burn, how much to eat, how much strength to spend staying awake when sleep would be easier. And yet most nights do not end in disaster. Most nights the fire holds just long enough. Bodies stay warm enough. Morning arrives. People rise stiff and tired, but alive. That success can make it easy to forget how close failure sometimes came. You drift in and out of sleep now, aware of the cold at the edges, but also aware of the shared effort holding it back. Even when warmth fails partially, people respond. They adapt in real time, improvising with whatever remains. As the night stretches on, the temperature finally steadies again. Not warm, but survivable. Muscles relax a fraction. Breathing evens out. The worst has passed, at least for this night. You understand now that medieval survival was never absolute. It was probabilistic, a balance of preparation, cooperation, and chance. Some nights tipped the wrong way, many did not. As you settle again, you hold this knowledge gently, not to frighten yourself, but to respect the effort embedded in every ordinary morning that followed a long cold night. Each dawn was earned, sometimes narrowly, by people who learned to live with the possibility of failure and keep going anyway. You become aware of how many people exist just beyond the walls of this room. Even in sleep, the sense of community lingers quiet but present. Medieval winter nights are rarely faced alone, even when doors are closed. Warmth extends outward through relationships, habits, and shared expectations that do not end at the threshold. You think about neighbours settling in nearby each household, making the same calculations. How much fuel to burn? How many layers to wear? Who sleeps where? These decisions echo across the village or street, synchronized by the season itself. Winter turns individual survival into a collective rhythm. In colder months, people pay closer attention to one another. A light in a window after midnight signals trouble. Smoke too early in the morning suggests a fire relit out of desperation rather than routine. Absence is noticed faster. Someone who does not open their shutters by mid-morning draws concern. You imagine a neighbour stepping out into the snow before dawn, breath-fogging, listening. Silence where there should be sound prompts a knock, a call. Sometimes a door is opened gently, sometimes forced. These moments are heavy with fear, but they come from care. Shared spaces matter more now. Communal halls, bakehouses, churches, any structure large enough to hold many bodies becomes a refuge during the worst cold. People gather not for ceremony, but for heat. Bodies clustered together can change the temperature of a room surprisingly quickly. You remember how warmth earlier came from shared beds and shared fires. This same principle expands outward. Villages function like larger households in winter. Resources circulate more freely. Wood is loaned. Food is shared. Favours are remembered. There is no formal system governing this. It runs on memory and reputation. Those who help in winter are helped later. Those who refuse find themselves isolated when they need support most. Cold enforces social bonds with quiet efficiency. You feel how different this is from modern isolation. Here, solitude is dangerous. Privacy shrinks in importance as temperature drops. Even disagreements soften under the pressure of survival. Winter has a way of rearranging priorities. Children grow up watching this happen. They learn who can be relied upon. They learn which doors open without hesitation. These lessons last a lifetime. Community is not abstract. It is warm hands and shared breath on cold nights. You hear a distant sound, maybe a door closing far away, maybe just the wind shifting. It reminds you that others are awake too, moving through their own routines of care. Someone tends a fire. Someone checks on an elder. Someone stays awake longer than planned. In some places, winter brings shared night watches, not just against fire or thieves, but against cold itself. A person walks between houses checking, listening, reporting back if something seems wrong. The role rotates. Fatigue is shared like everything else. You feel a subtle reassurance in knowing that if something went wrong here, someone might notice. Someone might come. This knowledge reduces fear, and reduced fear conserves energy. Calm bodies stay warmer. There are winters remembered for how people came together. Stories told later emphasize cooperation more than hardship. They speak of doors left unlocked, of extra bowls set on tables of fires that burned through the night because everyone contributed fuel. These memories are not sentimental. They are practical lessons preserved as stories. When the next hard winter arrives, people remember what worked. They repeat it. You lie still, feeling how the warmth around you is not only physical. It comes from trust built over years, from habits that assume others matter, from the quiet certainty that survival is shared work. As sleep deepens again, you sense the village or street breathing with you. Fires glowing, bodies curled, minds half awake. This collective endurance holds back the cold more effectively than any single wall or blanket. You drift comforted by the idea that even in the darkest, coldest hours, medieval people rarely faced the night entirely on their own. Community became insulation, wrapping itself round each household night after night until winter loosened its grip. You wake again gently this time with the sense that the night is thinning, not ending, just easing its grip. Your body feels tired but steady, shaped by hours of stillness and careful warmth. This is what endurance feels like when it works. Not comfort, not ease, just the quiet knowledge that you're still here. Medieval people did not expect winter nights to be pleasant. They expected them to be survivable. That expectation changed everything. Without the promise of perfect warmth, they learned to measure success differently. Waking alive mattered more than sleeping well. A stiff morning was acceptable. Frostbitten fingers were not. You feel how your body has adapted across the night. Muscles have learned where to hold tension and where to let go. Breathing has found its most economical rhythm. You're not warm in the modern sense, but you're no longer fighting the cold. That truce is enough. Around you, others begin to stir slightly. Not rising yet, just testing their limbs, checking sensation. Fingers wiggle inside sleeves. Toes press against straw and cloth. These small movements are assessments. Can I move? Can I stand? Did the night take anything from me? There is a quiet satisfaction when the answers are good enough. Relief spreads slowly. Someone exhales deeply. Another shifts with more confidence now that stiffness is easing. The worst hours have passed. You think about how this endurance shaped people over years. Winter trained patience. It taught restraint. It rewarded those who planned, who shared, who noticed details. It punished carelessness, but not always immediately. Lessons accumulated slowly reinforced each cold season. There is no pride here in suffering, just acceptance. People do not romanticize these nights while they're living them. They do not dwell on how hard it is. Dwelling wastes energy. Instead, they focus on what needs to be done next. You sense how expectations adjust across generations. Children raised in this environment learn early that discomfort is temporary. They learn that stillness has value. They learn that small actions matter. Pulling a blanket back into place. Closing a curtain properly. Eating when food is available. You also feel how endurance becomes invisible once it is routine. Surviving winter nights does not feel heroic to those who do it every year. It feels normal, necessary. Life simply continues. As the room grows, a shade lighter shapes emerge from shadow. The bed, the hearth, the outlines of people nearby. Cold still lingers, but it no longer dominates your attention. The body prepares itself for movement again. You stretch carefully, just enough to wake muscles without losing too much heat. Others do the same. There is a shared rhythm to this transition. No one rushes. Morning brings its own cold challenges and strength must be saved. You realise now that medieval survival was not built on single dramatic moments. It was built on repetition, on doing the same small things correctly night after night, on trusting that those habits would carry you through more often than not. The night has not defeated you. You have not defeated it either. You have endured together. That is the quiet victory medieval people counted on. As you settle back for a final stretch of rest before dawn fully arrives, you feel a deep calm. The cold has been managed, the system held. Morning will bring work, movement, fresh calculations. But for now you rest inside the simple success of having lasted another long winter night. You sense the approach of morning before you see it. The air changes first, losing a little of its sharpness. The cold does not disappear, but it loosens as if it knows its time is nearly done. Your body responds even before your mind does, breathing a little deeper, preparing to move again. Somewhere nearby embers are stirred. A faint glow brightens. Someone feeds the fire carefully, not too much, just enough to wake it. The sound is soft and familiar. This is how days begin here, not with warmth, but with the promise of it. You lie still, letting the night release you gradually. The lessons of these hours settle quietly inside you. You understand now how medieval people survived without modern heating, not through one clever trick, but through layers of knowledge stacked patiently over generations. They built homes that worked with the land. They slept close when closeness mattered. They ate with intention. They dressed for the dark. They learned when to move and when to stay perfectly still. They watched one another. They accepted discomfort without surrendering to it. The cold never vanished. It was never conquered. It was managed night after night by people who paid attention. As daylight strengthens, faces become clearer. Movements grow more confident. Someone stretches fully for the first time. Another laughs softly at stiff joints. These small sounds mark survival just as surely as any victory. You imagine stepping out into the morning cold now. It will bite harder than the night did. Daylight brings exposure. Work demands movement. Yet people rise anyway because life continues regardless of temperature. You feel gratitude for the warmth you have known in your own life, for the invisible systems that hum quietly in walls. But you also feel respect for those who lived without them, who learned to read the cold the way others read clocks. The medieval night fades behind you, leaving no neat ending, just continuation. Another fire to tend, another meal to plan, another night waiting its turn. You carry this understanding gently as you let yourself rest again, knowing the cold no longer needs your full attention. Now the pace slows, your breathing evens out, the images soften. The fire crackles quietly, steady and calm. The room holds its warmth just long enough. You are safe. You are warm enough. You can let go. Sleep comes easily now, without vigilance, without calculation, just rest. The night has taught you what it needed to teach. You drift wrapped in quiet as the last traces of cold dissolve into memory. Sweet dreams,